Boy, am I excited to start talking about this. I've been wanting to talk about Deltarune for a very long time. The script for this video is very old, so I'm very glad that I'm getting around to talking about it. Deltarune's main plot is not what it seems. From someone who isn't an Undertale fan, it could seem as a simple, happy-go-lucky story of good guys doing good things and bad guys doing bad things, and the endings just being a confusing cliffhanger to get you interested in the next game. But seasoned Undertale fans would recognize a lot of the similarities that are going on between Deltarune and Undertale. Toby Fox has stated that Deltarune does not take place in the Undertale timeline, so we know this is a separate story. But we also know that Toby Fox isn't completely separating them. There are obvious similarities between Undertale and Deltarune. The most foremost being the characters. Most Undertale characters are in this game, with the same names and same personalities, but their memories are completely different. Getting a little more specific about comparisons, let's talk about the main character of the game, Kris. Kris is very similar to Chara from Undertale. Firstly, they both wear the same jacket, this green and yellow striped jacket, and are both cared for by Toriel. And another fun fact, Chara loved chocolate, and we learned that in the original game if you do a little digging. And the same can be true in Deltarune. But these similarities that Kris and Chara, or Kris and Frisk, have, I predict, are a red herring. Toby Fox isn't stupid. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's specifically choosing these facts to be put in the game, and he's not hiding them at all. Kris looks like Chara, and you can immediately see that if you've played through Undertale. But from my experience playing through Toby Fox's games, the simplest answer is not always the correct answer. I believe that Toby Fox is using this comparison to Chara as a red herring. I don't believe Toby Fox is trying to tell the exact same story as Undertale. That would be a bit lazy on his part. So what's my proof for this? I believe that there is corroborating evidence that Kris and the player are different streams of consciousness. And this can clearly be proven through Chapter 2 of Deltarune. Firstly, if you do the secret boss, Spamton, at the end of the fight, Susie and Rouse ask you if you're okay. We don't notice anything because Kris's sprite doesn't give any expression, but clearly Kris is disturbed by the fight. And you're given the option of yes and no, to tell them the truth if you're disturbed by the fight, or to lie to them. If you say no, Kris will scream no, as if he was disturbed by Spamton for a very long time, and Susie and Rouse embrace him and tell him everything is going to be okay. But if you force Kris to say that he wasn't disturbed by Spamton, Rouse's and Susie's dialogue is rather interesting. Kris apparently says everything's okay unconvincingly, and Rouse and Susie don't really believe your answer to be truthful. So even though you forced Kris to give an answer, Kris is fighting back against your answer. But why here and why now? Well, the Spamton fight is very foreshadowing, very clearly trying to display something a bit more sinister. While Spamton's strings were visible and clearly showed that he was not under his full control, Kris's strings are completely invisible, and no one knows that he's being controlled by the player. Here's some more evidence, though it's a bit depressing to think about. Kris doesn't really care for Rouse. Rouse is a very lovable character, always positive, always fun to listen to, always fun to be around, and the player can easily fall in love with Rouse. But Kris doesn't like Rouse at all. In fact, probably is disgusted by him. My prediction for this is that Rouse is very similar looking to Asriel. Asriel being Kris's brother. Kris hasn't seen Asriel in a very long time, since he's off to college. And Rouse isn't a replacement for Asriel in Kris's mind. More of a sad reminder of what once was. So at the end of the game, you learn of this festival that's coming up in the town, and you're able to decide who you would take to the festival. And if you tell Susie that you would take Rouse to the festival, Susie becomes confused at the way you said it, once again showing that Kris is fighting back against the player's choices. Now here's the coup de grace. This isn't really proven at all. There's not much evidence for it, but here's my prediction for what we are going to learn in the later chapters of this game. The mysterious endings that we see in chapters 1 and 2 of this evil, red-eyed, knife-wielding Kris ripping out his own soul and performing his own actions, while can be compared to Chara once again, because in Undertale, Chara takes control at the end, and the entire world is destroyed because of her. But I believe that this, once again, is a red herring. Kris's action of removing his soul is not some sinister, dark, evil twin in his own mind. I believe that that is the true Kris, removing the player's control from the situation. If you notice, you have no control over Kris when the soul is removed. Clearly, Kris isn't fully well without his soul, as he limps around, walks around super creepily, and probably in pain. And the action of creating the dark fountains is still quite mysterious. I believe that these dark worlds that are being created by the Knight, that we now know is Kris's way of attempting to find some form of freedom. The only way that he's able to create these dark worlds is without his soul, as we have seen. Now, I don't know what creating the dark worlds actually accomplishes. All we know is that if the darkness supersedes the light, it brings about the roaring, and this apocalyptic event will occur. And that may be Kris's goal, because the only reason Kris stops these other dark fountains is because the player forces him to. The plot of this game is much more enthralling, much more in-depth than one would believe by looking at it from the outside. And I am unbelievably excited for what Toby Fox is going to bring in the next 5 chapters. And I'm excited to see what I got right and what I got wrong. Thank you for watching.